Why don't you hide that scar? My brother said. No one wants to look at that, my aunt added with a smirk. She just wants attention. I stayed silent until her husband, a retired colonel, saw my arm and went pale. Operation Ironstorm, ma'am. My aunt's face went white. Imagine spending years building something with every fiber of your being, something that demands every ounce of your courage and sacrifice, only to have the people who should celebrate you tear it down. For me, that something was my life in the Air Force, and the people were my own family. It all culminated in a single, gut-wrenching moment at a family barbecue, where a scar on my arm, a badge of honor from a brutal mission, became the battleground for respect I'd fought a lifetime to earn. See, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Chester. I'm 41 now, but my journey started from the ground up, forging a career in the U.S. Air Force. We're talking discipline, deployments, and yes, this scar that tells its own story. For years, I showed up for my family, especially my Aunt Linda, who never really showed up for me. She mocked my uniform, my choices, everything. But when her own husband, a retired colonel, saw that scar and knew what it meant, everything, and I mean everything, changed. Have you ever felt dismissed or humiliated by the very people who should have been your biggest cheerleaders? If you have, you're not alone. I grew up in a working-class military family. In our house, respect and appearances mattered, sometimes more than warmth. My dad served 22 years in the Air Force, retiring as a master sergeant when I was just 16. Our home ran on military time, military discipline. You earned your place at the table through service and sacrifice. Then there was my mother's sister, Aunt Linda. She was the polar opposite. She married into the military, but never really absorbed its values. She was polished, loud, judgmental, and utterly convinced she knew what made a proper woman. Meanwhile, my mom quietly supported my dad through every deployment, every reassignment. Linda turned every family gathering into her personal stage. I remember my high school graduation. She showed up in a white pantsuit, sunglasses perched on her head, and spent the entire ceremony critiquing everyone else's outfits. So, when I told her at 22 that I was joining the Air Force, following in my dad's footsteps, she rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might just stick. You'll regret that haircut and those boots, she said, sipping her mimosa at the celebration brunch. Men don't like women who try to be men. My dad, bless his heart, said nothing, but his jaw, it tightened. I learned early on that Aunt Linda's approval wasn't something you earned through achievement. It was something she dispensed based on whether you fit her incredibly narrow definition of femininity and success. Still, I showed up. Birthdays, barbecues, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I wore my dress blues when protocol allowed, civilian clothes when it didn't. I'd listen to her go on about her book club, her garden, her theories on why modern women were too aggressive. I'd smile through her jokes about G.I. Jane and her oh-so-subtle suggestions that I'd never find a husband playing soldier. Her husband, Colonel Raymond Moore, was a retired Army officer. 30 years of service before he hung up his uniform. He was quiet, reserved. The kind of man who measured people in silence and spoke only when his words carried real weight. At family functions, he'd just sit in the corner with a beer, watching everything, saying almost nothing. I respected him from a distance, like you respect a mountain you've never climbed. When I deployed overseas for the first time, I sent gifts home. Care packages for my younger cousins, birthday cards for my mom, even a box of cigars for Colonel Raymond I'd picked up at a basic exchange in Germany. Aunt Linda? She never acknowledged them. But my cousins wrote thank you notes. The imbalance was always clear. I gave respect and loyalty. She gave criticism, disguised as concern. My basic military training at Lackland Air Force Base was exactly what I needed. The structure, the purpose, the clarity of expectations. You showed up. You performed. You earned your place. No one cared about your hair or your clothes, or whether you smiled enough. They cared if you could complete a 5-mile run, field strip a rifle, follow orders, and lead when necessary. I excelled, not because I was a natural, but because I understood the value of discipline. By the time I finished technical training and received my first assignment as a second lieutenant, I'd found something Aunt Linda's world could never offer, a true meritocracy. My first assignment took me to Joint Base San Antonio. I worked logistics, coordinating supply chains for overseas operations. The hours were long, the work was detailed, and I loved every single minute of it. I was promoted to first lieutenant within 2 years, right on schedule. My father came to the ceremony. My mother cried. Aunt Linda? She sent a card that said, "Congratulations on your promotion. Maybe now you can afford some nicer clothes for family events." I kept that card. I'm not sure why. Maybe as a constant reminder that some people will never see you clearly, no matter what you achieve. When I deployed to the Middle East for my second tour, I was a captain, leading a team of 15. We managed supply routes through hostile territory, coordinated air support, kept soldiers fed, armed, and mobile in conditions that would break most civilians. I came home with a commendation, a deeper understanding of what service truly meant, and a scar that would change everything. The mission that gave me that scar wasn't something I could talk about in detail. Operation Ironstorm was classified. It involved a rescue operation that went sideways when our convoy took fire. Shrapnel from an improvised explosive device tore through my left forearm, severing muscle, nicking bone. The field medics saved my arm. The surgeons at Lantil Regional Medical Center saved my career. But the scar? It remained. A thick, ropey line of tissue running from my wrist to my elbow. A permanent reminder of the day I'd pulled 2 injured airmen from a burning vehicle while rounds pinged off the metal around us. I didn't talk about it, not out of shame, but because it wasn't a story for barbecues. It was sacred ground, the kind of experience you only shared with people who had been there. For 2 years after I came home, I wore long sleeves to family functions. Not to hide the scar, but to avoid the questions. I knew my aunt wouldn't understand. I knew she'd find a way to make it about appearances, about what people might think. And I was right. After I came home from that second deployment, something shifted. Not with me, but with how my family saw me, or rather, how they refused to see me. I'd been promoted to major, of a rank I'd earned through competence, leadership, and the kind of grinding work that doesn't make headlines, but keeps the entire machine running. At 31, I was ahead of the promotion curve, and I knew it. My father knew it too. He'd shake my hand at family gatherings with a grip that said everything his words didn't. But Aunt Linda started treating my service like a phase I needed to outgrow. "You've had your adventure," she said at Easter dinner, passing the ham. "Time to settle down, find a nice man. Maybe use that GI Bill for something practical." I wanted to tell her I was using my experience for something practical, leading airmen, managing multi-million-dollar logistics operations, mentoring junior officers who looked to me for guidance. Instead, I just smiled and asked her to pass the roles. At family gatherings, she'd steer conversations away from my career with the precision of a social engineer. If someone asked about my deployment, she'd interrupt with a story about her garden or her latest home renovation. If I mentioned an upcoming assignment, she'd joke that I liked the attention of wearing a uniform. Her husband, Colonel Raymond Moore, rarely spoke during these exchanges. He'd just sit there, watching, measuring, his expression unreadable. I often wondered what he thought, whether he saw what I saw, a woman determined to diminish what she couldn't control. My brother, Ethan, even started to mirror her tone. He was 3 years younger, a sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, and had never considered military service. "You still doing that soldier thing?" he asked at my mother's birthday party, as if my career were a hobby I'd eventually tire of. That stung more, coming from him. We'd grown up in the same house, under the same flag, with the same father who'd taught us both about duty and honor. But somewhere along the line, Ethan had absorbed Aunt Linda's worldview, that real success meant civilian comfort, corporate climbing, keeping your hands clean. I brushed it off. I'd learned in the Air Force that not everyone would understand the choice to serve. Some people saw the uniform and thought of parades and salutes. They didn't see the 0-300 wake-ups, the months away from home, the weight of being responsible for lives beyond your own. They didn't understand that service wasn't just a job, it was identity, discipline, and sacrifice woven so tightly you couldn't separate them. Still, I stayed patient. I showed up to every barbecue, every holiday dinner, every celebration where Aunt Linda held court and my brother nodded along with her assessments of my life. I brought wine, helped set tables, played with my younger cousins, who, bless their hearts, would ask me questions about flying, even though I worked logistics, not flight ops. I answered their questions because someone needed to show them that military service was honorable, that the uniform meant something beyond what their mother thought. But that patience was wearing thin. Every dismissive comment, every redirect, every joke about attention-seeking added weight to a load I'd been carrying since I was 22. I told myself it didn't matter, that their opinions couldn't touch what I'd built. But that's the thing about disrespect from family, it finds the gaps in your armor. At my cousin Sarah's college graduation party, Aunt Linda introduced me to her friends as "Oh Rachel, the one who's in the military." Not Major Chester. Not my niece who serves our country. Just the one who's in the military, as if it were a quirk rather than a commitment. One of her friends asked what I did, and before I could answer, Aunt Linda laughed and said, "Oh, she moves boxes around." The table chuckled. I didn't. Colonel Raymond's eyes flipped to me across the patio, something unreadable in his expression. Then he looked away. I stayed another hour, then drove home to my apartment off base and sat in the silence, wondering why I kept subjecting myself to people who refused to see me. The answer, I knew, was the same reason I'd stayed in the Air Force through hard deployments and long hours. Walking away felt like surrender. And I'd been trained never to surrender. But the question was becoming louder. What exactly was I fighting for? If respect couldn't be earned through service, sacrifice, and competence, then what currency did my family deal in? I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew something had to change. That change came at a summer barbecue. A day that should have been about burgers, laughter, and sunlight. Instead, it became the day I stopped asking for permission to exist. The barbecue was supposed to be casual, my mother's 60th birthday, held at Aunt Linda's sprawling backyard with its manicured lawn and outdoor kitchen that looked like it belonged in a home design magazine. I'd driven 3 hours from base, bringing a gift and a fruit salad I'd assembled at 0530 that morning before PT. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, low humidity, the kind of day that made you forget that just 2 months prior, I'd been in a desert where the temperature hit 120 degrees by 1000. I wore civilian clothes, but for the first time in years, I chose short sleeves. A simple blue cotton shirt, jeans, sneakers. Nothing dramatic, but the scar was visible. That thick, ropey line of tissue running from my wrist to my elbow, slightly darker than my skin tone, textured in a way that caught the light differently. I'd made the decision that morning while getting dressed. I was tired of hiding. Tired of accommodating other people's comfort at the expense of my own truth. The scar was part of my story. Part of my service. If they couldn't handle it, that was their problem. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Aunt Linda was holding court near the grill, directing my uncle and Colonel Raymond on proper burger flipping technique. My brother was there with his girlfriend, a blonde woman in a sundress who worked in marketing. Cousins, family, friends, neighbors, maybe 40 people total, scattered across the yard in clusters of conversation and laughter. I hugged my mother, gave her the gift, and grabbed a beer from the cooler. For the first hour, everything was fine. I talked with Sarah about her new job, helped my younger cousin with his college essay, chatted with a family friend about base housing policies. The scar was visible, but no one mentioned it. Then we sat down to eat. Long tables arranged under a pergola, plates loaded with food, conversation flowing easily. I was sitting between Sarah and my brother, across from Aunt Linda and Colonel Raymond. Ethan noticed first. He was reaching for the potato salad when his eyes caught on my forearm, and his expression shifted. Something between surprise and discomfort. "Why don't you cover that scar?" he said, loud enough that the conversation around us dimmed. "No one wants to see that while eating." The table went quiet. Not completely silent, but that particular kind of hush where everyone's suddenly listening while pretending not to. I felt heat rise to my face, but I kept my voice level. "It's just a scar, Ethan." Aunt Linda snorted, setting down her fork with a deliberate clink. "She loves the attention. Always has." A few people laughed, that uncomfortable social chuckle that's more about tension relief than humor. I felt my jaw tighten. I wanted to respond. Wanted to explain. Wanted to tell them exactly what this scar represented. But I'd learned in the military that sometimes silence carries more weight than words. So, I said nothing. I looked down at my plate, cutting my burger into smaller pieces. I had no intention of eating. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. Colonel Raymond's fork had stopped halfway to his mouth. He was staring at my arm. His expression transformed from polite dinner guest to something else entirely. Recognition. Maybe shock. Something profound I couldn't quite name. The silence stretched. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with the authority of 30 years in command. "Operation Iron." "Storm, ma'am." The entire table went dead silent. I looked up, meeting his eyes. They were no longer the distant, measuring eyes of a man at a family barbecue. They were the eyes of a soldier recognizing another soldier's sacrifice. "Yes, sir," I said quietly. He stood. Everyone watched as this retired Army colonel, this man who rarely spoke more than 10 words at family gatherings, pushed back his chair and stood at attention. Then he saluted me. A slow, deliberate, textbook-perfect salute. My heart hammered in my chest. I stood automatically, returning the salute with the same precision. Aunt Linda's smirk had vanished. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes starting between her husband and me, trying to understand what was happening. "You were there." Colonel Raymond's voice was barely above a whisper. But in the silence, everyone heard it. "Yes, sir." "The convoy extraction. 3rd week of October." "Yes, sir." He lowered his salute, and I lowered mine. Then he did something I didn't expect. His eyes welled up. Not tears exactly, but a shine that spoke of memories too heavy to carry alone. "Then you've earned that scar 10 times over," he said, his voice rough. "And anyone who can't see that doesn't understand the first damn thing about service." No one spoke. Aunt Linda looked like she'd been slapped. My brother stared at his plate. The other guests exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to resume eating or wait for someone to explain. Colonel Raymond sat down slowly, his hands shaking slightly. He reached for his water glass, took a long drink, then looked at his wife. "Linda," he said quietly. "This woman pulled 2 injured airmen from a burning vehicle under enemy fire. The after-action report is still classified, but I read the commendation brief. She kept her team alive when most people would have frozen or run." Aunt Linda's face had gone pale. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said. My voice was steady now. You never asked. The barbecue continued, but the energy had shifted irrevocably. People ate quietly, conversations restarting in subdued tones. I finished my meal in silence, my appetite gone, but my posture straight. When I left an hour later, Colonel Raymond walked me to my car. I should have spoken up sooner, he said. The way she talks to you. I should have said something years ago. It's not your fight, sir. The hell it is, he said, his command voice emerging briefly. Then softer, your family. And you've served with distinction. That deserves respect, not mockery. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He extended his hand, and I shook it. A firm grip that lasted several seconds. Proud to know you, Major Chester. Thank you, sir. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind clear my head. Something had broken at that table, and I wasn't sure yet whether it could be repaired. But for the first time in years, I felt like I'd been seen, really seen. And that changed everything. After that day, things shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. The most immediate change was silence. Aunt Linda stopped calling. The family text chain, usually buzzing with pictures and plans, went quiet whenever I contributed. My brother sent a text 3 days after the barbecue, sorry if things got weird. You know, Linda, she doesn't think before she speaks. I read it twice, then put my phone down without responding. That wasn't an apology. It was an excuse, a deflection wrapped in false sympathy. It assumed I'd accept the same pattern that had played out for years, disrespect, followed by a half-hearted acknowledgement, followed by me pretending everything was fine. I was done pretending. At work, I threw myself into a new assignment. We were coordinating a massive logistics overhaul for airlift operations. 12-hour days minimum, weekend calls with overseas bases. The kind of work that required absolute focus. It was easier than dealing with family dynamics. At least at work, the metrics were clear. Either the cargo reached its destination on time, or it didn't. Either the mission succeeded, or it failed. No ambiguity, no hidden agendas. Captain Dana Nguyen, one of my fellow officers who'd become a close friend, noticed the change. We were reviewing supply manifests at 1700 on a Friday when she finally said something. You've been different since you came back from leave. What happened? I told her. Not everything. Operation Iron Storm was still classified, but enough. The barbecue, the comments, the scar. Colonel Raymond's salute. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from curiosity to anger to something like recognition. My mom's family is like that, she said when I finished. Immigrant mentality. They think any career that doesn't involve a corner office and a 6-figure salary is beneath their daughter. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. When I commissioned, my aunt told me I was wasting my potential. How do you deal with it? I asked. I stopped going to family events where I knew I'd have to justify my existence, she said simply. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't respect you. I thought about that conversation for days. The idea of actively withdrawing from family felt radical, almost transgressive. We were raised to believe family was sacred, that blood ties trumped everything else. But what did those ties mean if they only bound me to people who diminished what I valued most? A week after the barbecue, Colonel Raymond called me. Not texted. Called, which felt significant. Major Chester, he said when I answered, I wanted to follow up on what happened. Do you have a few minutes? Yes, sir. Good. I think we should talk. There's a coffee shop near Maxwell Base. Common ground, neutral territory. Tomorrow at 1000, if your schedule allows. I agreed. The next morning, I drove to the coffee shop, a local place that catered to military and civilian alike. Colonel Raymond was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of black coffee. He stood when I approached, and we shook hands before sitting. I'll get straight to it, he said. I owe you an apology. I've watched my wife disrespect you for years, and I said nothing. That was wrong. I wasn't expecting that, sir. You're not responsible for. Yes, I am, he interrupted gently. When you wear the uniform, you stand for something. When you take it off, those values should remain. I failed to live up to that standard. He took a sip of coffee, then continued. I was a field commander during Iron Storm's early planning phase. I wasn't there for the convoy extraction. By then, I'd rotated to a different theater. But I knew what that mission cost. We lost good people. The ones who survived carried wounds that don't always show up on medical reports. I nodded, my throat tight. When I saw your scar, I recognized the injury pattern immediately. Shrapnel trauma. Emergency field medicine. I knew what you'd been through, what you'd done. And then to hear my wife mock it. He stopped, collecting himself. That's not who I thought I married. Or maybe it is. And I've been making excuses for too long. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, traffic moved past the windows. Normal people going about normal lives, unaware of the conversation happening inside. She called me last night, he said finally. Asked me to explain what happened, why I reacted that way. So I told her everything I could without violating classification protocols. The mission parameters, the casualty rates, what it. means to earn a combat-related injury. How did she take it? Not well, he admitted. She doesn't have a framework for understanding military sacrifice. In her world, success is measured in social capital, appearances, control over narrative. Your career doesn't fit that framework, so she spent years trying to diminish it. And my brother just follows her lead. Your brother is insecure, Colonel Raymond said bluntly. He sees your achievements and feels diminished by comparison. It's easier for him to mock your path than to examine why his own feels empty. The assessment was harsh, but accurate. Ethan had always been competitive, always measuring his worth against external metrics. When those metrics made him feel inadequate, he lashed out. I'm not sure what to do with all this, I admitted. I spent years trying to earn their respect, and I'm starting to realize it was never about earning anything. They were never going to give it. Then stop trying, Colonel Raymond said. Focus on the people who already see your worth. Build your life around them. Everyone else is background noise. He finished his coffee, then pulled out his wallet and placed a challenge coin on the table between us. I recognized it immediately. A coin from his old unit, given only to soldiers who demonstrated exceptional courage. This belonged to a friend who died in combat, he said. I want you to have it. Not because you need validation, but because you've earned recognition from someone who understands what you've sacrificed. I picked up the coin, feeling its weight in my palm. Thank you, sir. One more thing, he said. Linda asked if we could all sit down together. You, her, me, your brother, and talk through what happened. I told her that decision is entirely yours. No pressure, no expectations. Just know the offer is there if you want it. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to draw a clean line and walk away. But another part, the part trained to solve problems and seek resolution, wondered if there was value in trying one more time. I need to think about it, I said. Take all the time you need. We stood, shook hands again, and he walked me to my car. As I drove back to base, I kept the challenge coin in my pocket. Its weight a reminder that respect, real respect, doesn't come from family obligation or social proximity. It comes from shared values, earned trust, and recognition between people who understand sacrifice. The question was whether my family could ever understand that, and whether I owed them the chance to try. I didn't respond to Colonel Raymond's offer for 2 weeks. Instead, I focused on work. My unit was preparing for an operational readiness inspection, which meant long days reviewing procedures, conducting training exercises, and ensuring every piece of equipment met standards. The work was demanding, but it provided clarity. In the military, you always knew where you stood. Performance was measured, feedback was direct, and respect was earned through competence. By the end of the second week, I'd made a decision. I called Colonel Raymond and told him I was willing to meet, once, with clear boundaries, and only if everyone involved understood that this wasn't about me defending my choices. It was about them finally listening. We met at a neutral location, a community center conference room that Colonel Raymond had reserved. My aunt, my brother, Colonel Raymond, and me. No other family members, no audience, no performance. Just the four of us and a conversation that was years overdue. Aunt Linda looked smaller than I remembered. She sat across from me, her hands folded on the table, her usual confidence visibly diminished. My brother sat next to her, fidgeting with his phone. Colonel Raymond took a chair slightly apart from the group, present but not directing. I'd prepared remarks, but when I opened my mouth, what came out was simpler than I'd planned. I'm here because Colonel Raymond asked me to come, I began. But I need you both to understand something. I'm not here to justify my career or apologize for my service. If you're expecting that, we can end this meeting right now. My brother looked up from his phone. Aunt Linda met my eyes. I'm here to give you one chance to really hear me, I continued. Not to hear the version of me you've created in your heads, the attention-seeking girl playing soldier, but to hear who I actually am and what my service actually means. Silence. Then Aunt Linda spoke, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. Raymond told me about the mission. About what you did. He told you what he could, I corrected. The full details are classified. But yes, I served in Operation Ironstorm. I led airmen into hostile territory. I made decisions that kept people alive. And I carried the physical and mental scars from that service. I didn't know, she said. You didn't ask, I replied, echoing what I'd said at the barbecue. In 10 years of military service, you never once asked about my deployments, my responsibilities, or what I actually do. You made assumptions based on your own framework of what women should be. And you spent a decade mocking me for not fitting that framework. My brother shifted uncomfortably. We weren't trying to. Yes, you were, I interrupted. Maybe not consciously, but impact matters more than intent. Every joke about attention-seeking. Every comment about playing soldier. Every time you changed the subject when I talked about my work. That was deliberate dismissal. And it added up. Aunt Linda's eyes were wet now. I thought I was helping. I thought if I pushed you, you'd realize you were wasting your potential on a career that didn't fit who you could be. Who did you think I could be? I asked. Someone softer, she admitted. Someone who didn't need to prove herself. Someone who could just be comfortable. I am comfortable, I said. I'm comfortable in my uniform. I'm comfortable leading airmen half my age who trust me with their careers and their lives. I'm comfortable making decisions under pressure that most people couldn't handle. What I'm not comfortable with is sitting at family dinners while you treat my life's work as a phase I'll outgrow. Colonel Raymond spoke for the first time. Linda, what Rachel is describing is called disrespect. And in the military, disrespect toward a superior officer, or any fellow service member, is a serious breach. The fact that she tolerated it from family for as long as she did speaks to her patience, not to any weakness in her character. My brother finally put his phone down. I guess I never thought about it that way. You always seemed so confident, so sure of yourself. I didn't think our opinions mattered to you. Of course, they mattered, I said. You're my family. But there's a difference between caring about someone's opinion and letting it define your worth. I stopped letting your opinions define me, but that doesn't mean they didn't hurt. We sat with that for a moment. Outside, I could hear children playing in the community center's gym, their laughter distant but clear. Normal life, continuing regardless of our heavy conversation. So, where do we go from here? Aunt Linda asked. That depends on you, I said. I'm not going to keep showing up to family events where I have to defend my existence. I'm not going to smile through jokes about my career. I'm not going to pretend that 10 years of disrespect can be erased with one conversation. What do you need from us? My brother asked. Respect, I said simply. Real respect. Not the kind that disappears when I leave the room. Not the conditional kind that depends on me fitting your expectations. Actual respect for the path I've chosen and the person I've become. Aunt Linda nodded slowly. I can try. I don't know if I can change overnight, but I can try. That's all I'm asking, I said. But understand, if the pattern continues, I'm done. I won't keep subjecting myself to people who refuse to see me. We talked for another hour, covering ground that should have been covered years ago. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were defensive moments, uncomfortable silences, and statements that didn't quite land right. But it was honest. When we finally stood to leave, Aunt Linda approached me hesitantly. Can I hug you? She asked. I considered it, then nodded. The hug was brief, awkward, weighted with all the years between us, but it was something. As I drove back to base, I felt lighter. Not because everything was resolved, it wasn't, but because I'd finally said what needed saying. I'd drawn boundaries, stated my terms, and put the responsibility for change where it belonged, on them, not me. 2 days later, I received orders for a new assignment. I was being promoted to lieutenant colonel and transferred to a strategic planning position at the Pentagon. The promotion would be effective in 3 months, pending completion of my current projects. I called my father first. He answered on the second ring, and when I told him the news, his voice cracked. Your mother would be so proud, he said. Then after a pause, I'm proud too. Always have been. I called Colonel Raymond next. He congratulated me, asked about the position, then said something I didn't expect. Linda wants to host a promotion ceremony. Small gathering, just family. She wants to do it right this time. I thought about it. Tell her I'll consider it, but it needs to be about the achievement, not about her redemption narrative. Understood, he said. And Rachel, for what it's worth, you're already one of the finest officers I've known. The rank just makes it official. That night, I sat in my apartment and looked at my left arm. The scar caught the lamplight, a silvered line against my skin. I thought about all the times I'd hidden it. All the energy I'd spent managing other people's comfort. No more. The scar was mine. The career was mine. The respect I'd earned was mine. And anyone who couldn't see that clearly didn't deserve space in my life. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And clarity, I'd learned, was its own kind of freedom. Without me around, family dynamics changed in ways I only heard about secondhand. My cousin Sarah called me a month after the promotion announcement, her voice excited. You have to hear what happened at Sunday dinner, she said. Mom tried to steer the conversation to her usual topics, but Ethan actually pushed back. He asked her why she never talks about your achievements the way she talks about my sister's engagement. I smiled despite myself. What did she say? She got defensive at first, but then Uncle Raymond backed him up. He said something like, Linda, our niece is about to become a lieutenant colonel. That's a bigger achievement than most people accomplish in their entire careers. Maybe it's time we acknowledge that. And she just deflated. Like she realized she couldn't control the narrative anymore. Then Emma, my little sister, asked if you could come talk to her JROTC class about military careers. Mom couldn't exactly say no in front of everyone. The shift was subtle but significant. At gatherings I didn't attend, my name came up differently. My achievements became reference points, conversation topics, sources of family pride instead of sources of discomfort. Colonel Raymond sent me photos occasionally. The family at Thanksgiving. My promotion announcement printed and framed on Aunt Linda's mantle. My brother wearing an Air Force cap I'd sent him years ago that he'd never worn before. The change in Aunt Linda was slower, more hesitant. She sent a card for my birthday, the first one in 5 years that didn't include a passive-aggressive comment about my life choices. It just said, "Proud of you. Love, Aunt Linda." Small words, but they meant something. Meanwhile, I poured myself into my new responsibilities. The strategic planning position required a different skill set: long-term thinking, interagency coordination, briefing senior leaders on complex operational scenarios. I worked with colonels, generals, and civilian defense officials who'd spent decades in their fields. The work was intellectually demanding in ways that frontline logistics never was, and I loved it. I also started mentoring younger officers, especially women dealing with subtle disrespect. Every story reminded me of my own journey. The dismissive comments, the casual sexism, the exhaustion of constantly proving yourself. One lieutenant told me about her family asking when she'd settle down and start a real life. I told her about Aunt Linda, about the barbecue, about learning to value herself independently of family validation. "So, what do you do when the people who should support you don't?" she asked. "You find the people who do," I said. "And you build your life around them. Everyone else is optional." The mentoring work became one of my favorite responsibilities. I started hosting quarterly coffee sessions for junior female officers, creating space for them to discuss challenges without fear of career repercussions. Captain Dana Nguyen co-facilitated with me, and together we built a network of support that spanned bases and career fields. "You know what's interesting?" Dana said after one session. "You're doing for these women what you wish your family had done for you." She was right. I turned my own experience of being unseen into a mission to ensure others felt visible. When I was pinned for lieutenant colonel, the ceremony was exactly what I'd requested: professional, dignified, and focused on the achievement rather than family drama. My father pinned one of my new rank insignias, and Colonel Raymond, at my request, pinned the other. Aunt Linda attended, sitting in the back row with my brother. She didn't try to take center stage. She just watched. And when I caught her eye afterward, she nodded with what looked like genuine respect. The reception was small: fellow officers, mentors, and the family members who'd actually supported my career. My father gave a short speech about watching me grow from a determined child to an accomplished officer. Colonel Raymond talked about the first time he'd really seen me, not at a family gathering, but at that barbecue, when my scar told a story my family had refused to hear. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. Service means different things to different people. For me, it's always meant this: showing up, doing the work, and leading with integrity. Even when recognition doesn't come. Especially when recognition doesn't come. Today isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about acknowledging a milestone in a career I'm proud of, surrounded by people who've supported that career. That's all I've ever wanted. Afterward, Aunt Linda approached me carefully. "That was a beautiful ceremony," she said. "Thank you for including us," I said simply. "Your family. Even when it's complicated. I want you to know I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about respect, about really seeing you. I'm trying." "I know," I said. And I did know. The change wasn't perfect, wasn't complete, but it was real. She was trying, and that was more than I'd had before. 2 years passed. I excelled in my position, received top evaluations, and was identified as a fast-track candidate for colonel. My personal life expanded beyond work. I dated, traveled, took up photography as a hobby. I built a life that felt full, not because it looked a certain way, but because it aligned with my values. The mentoring work grew beyond coffee sessions. I started speaking at military academies, writing articles on leadership for professional journals, and serving on panels about women in combat roles. My perspective, shaped by years of proving myself in hostile environments, both abroad and at home, resonated with audiences who'd faced similar challenges. At one conference, a young captain approached me after my presentation. "You talked about family not understanding your service," she said. "Did that ever get better?" "Eventually," I said, but not because they suddenly understood. Because I stopped needing them to understand in order to value myself. That sounds lonely. Sometimes it is, I admitted. But it's less lonely than spending your life begging for validation from people who refuse to give it. She nodded, and I saw recognition in her eyes. We exchanged contact information, and she became part of the growing network of officers I mentored. The work gave me purpose beyond rank and assignments. I was building something lasting, a community of support for people who'd been where I'd been, who needed what I'd needed and never fully received. Aunt Linda and I settled into a new normal. We saw each other at major family events, holidays, milestones, celebrations. But the relationship had boundaries now. She'd learned not to comment on my appearance, my relationship status, or my career choices. I'd learned to accept her limitations while not letting them define my worth. My brother changed more dramatically. At 35, he enlisted. Not in the Air Force, he joined the Army, starting as an E1 despite his age and education. When he called to tell me, his voice was sheepish. I know it's late, he said. And I know I don't have your natural aptitude for this, but I've spent 10 years in sales and I feel empty. I need to do something that matters. What does Aunt Linda think? I asked. She's horrified, he admitted. But I'm done living for her approval. Watching you these past few years, watching you build a career on your own terms, despite everyone's opinions, it made me realize I've never done that. It's going to be hard, I warned him. Basic training doesn't care how old you are or what your civilian resume looks like. You'll be treated like every other recruit. I know, he said. That's kind of the point. He shipped out 3 months later. I sent him care packages during basic training, just like I'd sent packages to deployed soldiers for years. His letters were humbling. Descriptions of physical challenges, mental exhaustion, the grinding work of transforming from civilian to soldier. I finally understand what you meant about service being identity, he wrote in one letter. It's not something you do, it's something you become. I'm sorry it took me this long to see that. I wrote back with encouragement and practical advice. The brother who'd mocked my soldier thing was learning firsthand what that thing actually meant. It didn't erase the years of dismissiveness, but it created space for a different kind of relationship. At family gatherings now, conversations shifted. Instead of Aunt Linda dominating the narrative, we talked about Ethan's training, my latest assignment, Sarah's graduate program, Emma's ROTC scholarship. The focus distributed more evenly, and with it, the power dynamics shifted. Aunt Linda still hosted events, still maintained her social persona, but she'd lost the ability to define everyone else's worth through her commentary. She could offer opinions, but they no longer carried the weight they once did. Colonel Raymond and I maintained regular contact. We met for coffee every few months, discussing military history, leadership challenges, and the state of national defense. He'd become a mentor in the truest sense. Someone who saw my potential and helped me develop it without trying to shape me into something I wasn't. You've done well, he told me at one of our meetings, not just professionally, but personally. You figured out how to maintain family relationships without sacrificing yourself. That's harder than most people realize. I learned from watching you, I said. You stayed married to Aunt Linda, but you never let her worldview become yours. You maintained your integrity while navigating her personality. 30 years of practice, he said with a dry smile. And it still isn't easy. Does she understand yet? Really understand what service means? He considered the question. She understands more than she did. She'll never understand completely. She didn't live it, didn't grow up in it the way you and I did. But she's learned to respect what she doesn't understand. That's progress. It was progress. Imperfect. Incomplete, but real. By my 40th birthday, I'd achieved what I'd set out to achieve. A career built on competence, respect earned through service, and a life that aligned with my values. The relationships that mattered had deepened. The ones that didn't had faded or transformed into something healthier. Aunt Linda sent a gift for my birthday, a shadow box she'd commissioned containing my rank insignia from second lieutenant through lieutenant colonel, along with a photo from my first day in uniform and a handwritten note that read, "I'm learning to see you clearly. Thank you for your patience." I hung it in my office next to the challenge coin Colonel Raymond had given me years ago. The scar on my arm had faded to a thin silver line, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. But I never covered it anymore. It was part of my story, part of my service, part of the person I'd become. At a mentoring session that year, a young lieutenant asked me what I'd learned from everything I'd been through. That respect isn't something you beg for or negotiate, I said. It's something you establish through boundaries, consistency, and the willingness to walk away from people who refuse to give it. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when you establish those boundaries, people rise to meet them. They become better versions of themselves because you refuse to accept less. What if they don't? She asked. Then you've lost nothing except the illusion that they were capable of seeing you. And that's not really a loss. That's clarity. The session ended, and I drove home through familiar streets, thinking about how far I'd come. Not just in rank or responsibility, but in understanding my own worth independently of anyone else's validation. It wasn't the dramatic transformation that people write stories about. It was quieter than that. A series of small decisions, boundaries established and maintained, relationships renegotiated or ended. But it was mine, and that made all the difference. It's been 5 years since that barbecue. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Chester, United States Air Force, 41 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades building a career I'm proud of. The scar on my left arm is still visible, faded now to a thin line that catches light. Differently than the surrounding skin, a permanent record of Operation Iron Storm, and the day I pulled 2 airmen from a burning vehicle while the desert burned around us. At every new officer orientation I lead, I roll up my sleeve and tell them the same thing. Every mark you earn in service, physical or otherwise, is a record of courage, competence, and commitment. Never let anyone shame you for surviving. Never let anyone diminish what you've sacrificed. And never, ever apologize for being exactly who you are. The younger officers listen with an intensity one recognize. They're at the beginning of their journeys, facing the same challenges I faced. Families who don't understand, civilian friends who can't relate, the constant low-grade pressure to be softer, quieter, more accommodating. I tell them what I wish someone had told me earlier. That service is its own reward, that external validation is nice, but not necessary, and that the respect that matters most is the respect you give yourself. Aunt Linda still hosts family events. She's 63 now, still polished, still social, but the sharp edges have softened. She asks about my work now, actually listens to the answers, and introduces me to her friends as our Rachel, Lieutenant Colonel in the Air Force, with something that sounds like pride. It's not perfect. She still occasionally comments on my lack of a husband or children, still doesn't fully grasp what my career entails, but she's learned to lead with respect rather than criticism. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no tearful reconciliation scene, no moment where she suddenly understood everything I'd been trying to tell her for years. Instead, it was gradual. A series of small corrections, boundaries I maintained, conversations where I refused to accept less than what I deserved. Over time, she adapted. Not because she fundamentally changed who she was, but because I fundamentally changed what I would tolerate. My brother completed his enlistment and re-upped for another term. He's a sergeant now, E5, stationed in Georgia with a wife he met during technical training. When we talk, there's a mutual respect that wasn't there before, the kind that only comes from understanding sacrifice firsthand. He calls me for advice sometimes, asking about leadership challenges or how to handle difficult subordinates. I help when I can, and occasionally I ask him for perspective on enlisted culture, areas where my officer experience leaves gaps. I get it now, he told me last Christmas. Why you stayed in, even when we were all being assholes about it. There's something about serving that gets into your bones. You can't really explain it to people who haven't done it. No, I agreed. You can't. Colonel Raymond retired fully from military life, but stays active in veteran organizations. We still meet for coffee quarterly, and he's become one of my most trusted advisors. When I'm facing a difficult decision, I call him. When I need perspective on navigating senior leadership politics, he provides it. The respect between us is mutual, built on shared values and shared understanding of what service costs. Last month, he invited me to speak at a veterans event he was organizing. The audience was mostly older, mostly men, Vietnam and Gulf War veterans who'd served in different eras, but shared the common bond of military service. I talked about Operation Iron Storm, to the extent classification allowed, about leadership under pressure, about carrying visible and invisible scars with pride. Afterward, an elderly Vietnam vet approached me. "Thank you for your service, Colonel," he said, saluting. "And thank you for saying what needed saying about scars. I've spent 50 years covering mine." I returned his salute, then shook his hand. "It's never too late to stop covering them, sir." He nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. Those moments, the connections with other veterans, the mentoring of younger officers, the quiet pride of knowing I've served with integrity, those are what make everything worthwhile. Not the rank, not the recognition, but the knowledge that I've contributed something meaningful to something larger than myself. The mentoring network I started has grown into a formal organization now, with chapters at bases across the country. We host quarterly conferences, maintain an online forum, and provide resources for female officers, dealing with challenges ranging from sexual harassment to family obligations to career transitions. I serve on the board, contributing when my operational schedule allows. Captain Dana Nguyen, my friend and colleague, was promoted to major last year. She's taken over day-to-day leadership of the organization while I provide strategic guidance. Watching her excel, watching the network grow beyond what I could build alone, that's its own kind of success. At the last conference, a young second lieutenant approached me during the networking session. She was fresh out of the academy, bright-eyed and idealistic in the way that only brand new officers can be. "I heard your story," she said, "about your family not understanding your service. I'm dealing with something similar. My parents wanted me to go to medical school. They think I'm wasting my potential. What do you think?" I asked. "I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said firmly. "But it's hard when the people you love don't see that." "It is hard," I agreed. "And I won't lie and say it gets easy, but it gets clearer. You learn to trust your own judgment more than other people's opinions. You learn that the validation that matters comes from within, from the work itself, from the people you serve alongside." "Did your family ever come around?" "Eventually," I said, "but by the time they did, I'd already learned not to need it. That's the real freedom, not getting approval, but realizing you can thrive without it." She thanked me and walked away. And I hoped she'd remember that conversation when things got difficult, because they would get difficult. Service always is. That night, I stood in my apartment looking at the shadow box Aunt Linda had made. My rank progression, captured in silver and gold insignia. Next to it hung the challenge coin from Colonel Raymond, the one that belonged to his friend who died in combat. And beside that, a photo from my promotion ceremony. Me in dress blues, standing tall. The scar on my arm visible and proud. This is the legacy I'm building. Not perfection. Not universal approval. But integrity. Service with honor. Leadership rooted in respect, both given and demanded. A life aligned with values that matter. Some lessons take time, but respect once earned, truly earned, not through family obligation, but through demonstrated competence and courage, doesn't fade. It endures. And so do I. 2 years later, I'm standing in a briefing room at the Pentagon, surrounded by maps, data projections, and senior leadership, when my phone buzzes with a text from my father. Your mother's in the hospital. Heart attack, stable now, but it was close. The meeting continues around me. Talk of supply chain vulnerabilities, operational timelines, strategic resource allocation, but my mind is suddenly elsewhere. I excuse myself quietly, step into the corridor, and call him back. She's okay, he says before I can ask. They caught it early. She's in ICU at Walter Reed, conscious and talking, asking for you. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I say. I inform my supervisor, grab my cover, and drive across the city with my emergency. Flashers on. Walter Reed Army Medical Center is familiar territory. I've visited wounded airmen here, attended ceremonies, briefed on medical logistics. But walking through those doors as a family member rather than an officer feels different. The professional distance collapses. My father is in the waiting room, looking older than I remember. He's 70 now, retired 15 years, and the worry etched into his face makes him look every day of it. We embrace briefly, and he fills me in on the details. She'd been gardening, felt chest pain, had the presence of mind to call 911 immediately. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. The cardiologist said that quick response probably saved her life. Can I see her? I ask. They're limiting visitors to 15 minutes every hour. Your aunt's in there now. Of course she is. Aunt Linda would have rushed over the moment she heard, taking charge in the way she always does during crisis. For all her flaws, she shows up when it matters, at least for her sister. When Linda emerges from the ICU, her makeup is smudged, her usual composure fractured. She sees me, and something crosses her face. Relief maybe, or recognition that this situation is bigger than our complicated history. She's asking for you, Linda says quietly. She's weak, but she's herself. Don't tire her out. I nod and enter the ICU. My mother looks small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors and 4 lines, but her eyes are clear when she sees me. I take her hand carefully, mindful of the pulse oximeter on her finger. Hi, Mom. Rachel, she says, her voice thin but steady. You didn't have to rush over. I'm fine. You had a heart attack. I'm exactly where I should be. She smiles weakly. Always so dutiful. You get that from your father. We sit in silence for a moment, just holding hands. The monitors beep rhythmically, measuring heartbeats and oxygen levels, reducing life to numbers on screens. I'm proud of you, she says suddenly. I don't say it enough, but I am. You built a life on your own terms. That takes courage I never had. Mom, let me finish, she interrupts gently. I've watched you handle Linda's criticism, your brother's dismissiveness, all of it, and you never broke. You bent sometimes, but you never broke. That's strength. My throat tightens. You taught me that. You and Dad. You showed me what it means to serve with integrity. We tried, she says, but you took it further than we ever did. You made it your own. A nurse enters, checks the monitors, notes something on a chart, and gives me a look that says my time is almost up. I'll be back tomorrow, I tell my mother. And every day until you're discharged. You have work. I have leave time, I say firmly. And you're more important than any briefing. She squeezes my hand, and I leave before she can argue further. The next 2 weeks become a rhythm. Mornings at the hospital, afternoons handling work remotely from the waiting room, evenings coordinating with doctors and insurance companies. My father stays at her side during visiting hours. I handle logistics, the thing I'm best at, ensuring medications are ordered, follow-up appointments are scheduled, the house is prepared for her recovery. Aunt Linda is there constantly, oscillating between helpful and overwhelming. She brings food no one asked for, reorganizes the waiting room magazines, offers unsolicited medical opinions based on articles she's read online. But she also sits with my mother when the rest of us need breaks, advocates fiercely with nurses when pain medication is delayed, and coordinates the extended family so my father and I aren't buried in well-meaning phone calls. On the 4th day, during one of the quiet afternoon periods, Linda and I find ourselves alone in the cafeteria. We're both exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline. Thank you for being here, she says, stirring her coffee mechanically. I know things have been complicated between us, but having you here matters to your mother. It matters to me too. She's family, I say simply. This is where I need to be. Linda nods, then looks at me directly. I've been thinking a lot these past few days about mortality, about what we leave behind, about all the time I wasted criticizing you instead of celebrating you. I don't respond immediately. This isn't the place for another reckoning, not with my mother fighting to recover 2 floors above us. I'm not looking for absolution, Linda continues. I know I can't undo the years of dismissiveness, but watching you these past few days, the way you've taken charge, the way you balance compassion with confidence. I finally see what Raymond's been telling me all along. You're not playing at being a soldier. You are a soldier. It's as fundamental to who you are as breathing. It's taken you a long time to see that, I say, keeping my voice neutral. It has, she admits. And I'm sorry it required your mother's heart attack to make me see clearly. That's not fair to you. No, I agree. It's not. We sit in silence, drinking bad hospital coffee. 2 women who've spent years misunderstanding each other, finally finding common ground in crisis. For what it's worth, Linda says quietly, I'm proud of you too. I know I haven't said it, haven't shown it, but I am. I appreciate that, I say, and I mean it. Even though the words would have meant more a decade ago. My mother is discharged after 10 days. The cardiologist prescribes medications, lifestyle changes, and cardiac rehabilitation. My father will be her primary caregiver, but I arrange for a visiting nurse for the first 2 weeks and set up a family schedule so someone checks in daily. My brother requests emergency leave and flies in from Georgia. He's gained muscle from military training, carries himself with the posture of someone who's learned discipline through structure. When he arrives at the house, he hugs me tightly. Thanks for holding down the fort, he says. I couldn't get here sooner. We were in the field. No communication. I know how it works, I say. I'm glad you're here now. We fall into an easy partnership, tag-teaming the household tasks while our father focuses on our mother. Ethan cooks something he learned in the army, while I handle medical coordination. In the evenings, we sit on the back porch and talk about our respective careers, swapping stories that our parents don't need to hear about close calls and difficult commands, and the weight of responsibility. I think about that barbecue sometimes, he says one evening, the one where I made that comment about your scar. I was such an ass. You were, I agree. But you've grown. Military will do that, he says. Strip away all the bullshit. Show you what actually matters. I spent 10 years thinking success meant sales numbers and bonuses. Now I realize that was just noise. What matters now? I ask. Purpose, he says immediately. Knowing that what you do has meaning beyond yourself. You figured that out at 22. Took me till 35. Better late than never. He laughs and we sit in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over the suburban neighborhood where we grew up. By the 3rd week, my mother is strong enough to sit in the living room, receive visitors, and complain about the restrictions her cardiologist has imposed. She's not allowed to drive for 6 weeks, can't lift anything heavier than 10 pounds, must attend cardiac rehab 3 times a week. She hates all of it, which the doctors assure us is a good sign. Frustration means she's feeling better. Colonel. Raymond visits, bringing flowers and his quiet, steady presence. He and my father talk in the den about old deployments, shared experiences, the specific loneliness of military life that spouses rarely understand. Watching them together, I'm reminded that service creates bonds that transcend service itself. How are you holding up? Raymond asks me later, finding me in the kitchen preparing dinner. I'm fine, I say automatically, then correct myself. Actually, I'm tired and worried and grateful she's alive. All of it at once. That's normal, he says. Crisis brings everything to the surface. Gratitude, fear, unresolved tensions. How's it been with Linda? Surprisingly okay, I admit. We had a conversation. Not a complete resolution, but an acknowledgement. She's trying. She is, he confirms. This scared her, made her realize how much time she's wasted on things that don't matter. She's not going to transform overnight, but she's more aware now. Awareness is a start, I say. He helps me chop vegetables, and we work in companionable silence. This is what real support looks like, I think. Showing up, doing the work, being present without needing credit or recognition. During the 4th week, I received notification that I'm being considered for a strategic position that would require a move to Colorado Springs. It's a significant opportunity, one that could position me for promotion to full colonel within 2 years. The timing feels impossible. How can I consider relocating when my mother is recovering? When my father might need support? When family suddenly feels more fragile than ever? I discuss it with my father one evening after my mother has gone to bed early. You should take it, he says immediately. I haven't even told you what it is yet. Doesn't matter, he says. I know that look. It's the same look you had when you told us you were joining the Air Force. It's an opportunity that matters. But Mom, she'll be fine, he interrupts. She's recovering well. We have support. And Rachel, your mother would never forgive me if I let you turn down a career opportunity because of her health scare. She didn't raise you to put your life on hold. It's not putting my life on hold. It's being here when you need me. We don't need you, he says. Not at the cost of your career. You've worked too hard, sacrificed too much. Take the position. We'll visit. You'll visit. Technology exists. We'll manage. I consider his words. Part of me wants to argue, to insist that family comes first, that I should stay close during this uncertain time. But another part, the part that's been shaped by 2 decades of military service, knows he's right. My mother is stable. The crisis has passed. Life continues. I'll think about it, I say. Don't think too long, he warns. The best opportunities don't wait for perfect timing. That night, I sit on the back porch under a clear sky, thinking about choices and consequences, about duty to family and duty to self. The military taught me that mission comes first, but it also taught me that taking care of your people is part of the mission. Which people? Which mission? The lines blur. My phone rings. It's Captain Dana Nguyen, now Major Nguyen, calling from her new assignment in Japan. I heard about your mom, she says. How's she? I fill her in on the recovery, the family dynamics, the complicated emotions of crisis management. And how are you? She asks, cutting through my deflection. Confused, I admit. I got offered a position in Colorado Springs. Major career opportunity, but the timing feels wrong. Is your mom going to die in the next 6 months? Dana asks bluntly. No, at least not if she follows medical advice. Then the timing is fine, Dana says. Rachel, you can't put your career on hold every time family needs you. That's a trap women fall into constantly. Always available, always accommodating, always sacrificing. You've spent 20 years building a career. Don't derail it now. But what if something happens? Then you'll handle it, she interrupts. The same way you've handled every other crisis. You'll get emergency leave. You'll fly home. You'll manage the situation. But you can't live your life around what ifs. She's right, and I know it. The guilt I'm feeling isn't about my mother's actual needs. It's about old patterns, old expectations, the inherited belief that women should always put family first. Take the job, Dana says firmly. Your mom will be proud. Your dad will be proud. And you'll be exactly where you're supposed to be. After we hang up, I sit in the darkness for a long time. Then I go inside, open my laptop, and write an email accepting the Colorado Springs position. My hands shake slightly as I hit send. But the decision feels right. The next morning, I tell my parents over breakfast. My mother's face lights up immediately. Colorado Springs, she says. That's a wonderful assignment. I'll leave in 3 months, I say. Plenty of time to make sure you're stable. I'm stable now, she says firmly. Don't you dare use me as an excuse to delay your career. My father grins. Told you she'd say that. They're genuinely happy for me. And in their happiness, I feel something release. A burden I didn't realize I was carrying. The weight of believing I had to choose between career and family. I don't. I can have both, just not in the way Aunt Linda's generation defined having both. Before I return to Washington, there's a small family dinner. Nothing elaborate, just my parents, Aunt Linda, Colonel Raymond, Ethan, and his wife. My mother is tired, but present, seated at the head of the table in the spot she's always occupied. Midway through the meal, she raises her water glass. I want to make a toast, she says, to Rachel, who's been our rock these past weeks. Who's built a career we're all proud of, and who's about to start a new chapter in Colorado. We're grateful for you, sweetheart, more than we probably say. Everyone raises their glasses. Aunt Linda's eyes are wet, and she nods at me across the table, an acknowledgement that carries years of unspoken apologies. To Rachel, they say in unison. I raise my own glass, looking around the table at these complicated, imperfect people who've shaped me in ways both painful and profound. This is family, messy, difficult, occasionally disappointing, but also enduring. We hurt each other and heal each other in cycles that never quite resolve. To family, I say, in all its complexity. We drink, and the conversation resumes, and life continues in its imperfect, beautiful way. 3 months from now, I'll leave for Colorado Springs. I'll take the next step in a career I've built with intention and integrity. I'll carry with me the lessons learned from years of navigating respect and disrespect, of drawing boundaries and maintaining them, of learning to value myself independently of anyone else's validation. But tonight, I'm here, present, grateful, and finally fully at peace with all of it. That day didn't rewrite the past, but it set my terms for the future. I don't hide the scar, and I don't negotiate my worth. So tell me, have you ever had family dismiss your work or your wounds? And how did you respond? What boundary did you set that finally changed the tone at home? Who surprised you by standing up for you when it mattered? If you were at that barbecue, what would you have said to my aunt or to me? Do you have a scar story, visible or not, that you're ready to own today? Raymond visits, bringing flowers and his quiet, steady presence. He and my father talk in the den about old deployments, shared experiences, the specific loneliness of military life that spouses rarely understand. Watching them together, I'm reminded that service creates bonds that transcend service itself. How are you holding up? Raymond asks me later, finding me in the kitchen preparing dinner. I'm fine, I say automatically, then correct myself. Actually, I'm tired and worried and grateful she's alive. All of it at once. That's normal, he says. Crisis brings everything to the surface. Gratitude, fear, unresolved tensions. How's it been with Linda? Surprisingly okay, I admit. We had a conversation. Not a complete resolution, but an acknowledgement. She's trying. She is, he confirms. This scared her, made her realize how much time she's wasted on things that don't matter. She's not going to transform overnight, but she's more aware now. Awareness is a start, I say. He helps me chop vegetables, and we work in companionable silence. This is what real support looks like, I think. Showing up, doing the work, being present without needing credit or recognition. During the 4th week, I received notification that I'm being considered for a strategic position that would require a move to Colorado Springs. It's a significant opportunity, one that could position me for promotion to full colonel within 2 years. The timing feels impossible. How can I consider relocating when my mother is recovering? When my father might need support? When family suddenly feels more fragile than ever? I discuss it with my father one evening after my mother has gone to bed early. You should take it, he says immediately. I haven't even told you what it is yet. Doesn't matter, he says. I know that look. It's the same look you had when you told us you were joining the Air Force. It's an opportunity that matters. But Mom, she'll be fine, he interrupts. She's recovering well. We have support. And Rachel, your mother would never forgive me if I let you turn down a career opportunity because of her health scare. She didn't raise you to put your life on hold. It's not putting my life on hold. It's being here when you need me. We don't need you, he says. Not at the cost of your career. You've worked too hard, sacrificed too much. Take the position. We'll visit. You'll visit. Technology exists. We'll manage. I consider his words. Part of me wants to argue, to insist that family comes first, that I should stay close during this uncertain time. But another part, the part that's been shaped by 2 decades of military service, knows he's right. My mother is stable. The crisis has passed. Life continues. I'll think about it, I say. Don't think too long, he warns. The best opportunities don't wait for perfect timing. That night, I sit on the back porch under a clear sky, thinking about choices and consequences, about duty to family and duty to self. The military taught me that mission comes first, but it also taught me that taking care of your people is part of the mission. Which people? Which mission? The lines blur. My phone rings. It's Captain Dana Nguyen, now Major Nguyen, calling from her new assignment in Japan. I heard about your mom, she says. How's she? I fill her in on the recovery, the family dynamics, the complicated emotions of crisis management. And how are you? She asks, cutting through my deflection. Confused, I admit. I got offered a position in Colorado Springs. Major career opportunity, but the timing feels wrong. Is your mom going to die in the next 6 months? Dana asks bluntly. No, at least not if she follows medical advice. Then the timing is fine, Dana says. Rachel, you can't put your career on hold every time family needs you. That's a trap women fall into constantly. Always available, always accommodating, always sacrificing. You've spent 20 years building a career. Don't derail it now. But what if something happens? Then you'll handle it, she interrupts. The same way you've handled every other crisis. You'll get emergency leave. You'll fly home. You'll manage the situation. But you can't live your life around what ifs. She's right, and I know it. The guilt I'm feeling isn't about my mother's actual needs. It's about old patterns, old expectations, the inherited belief that women should always put family first. Take the job, Dana says firmly. Your mom will be proud. Your dad will be proud. And you'll be exactly where you're supposed to be. After we hang up, I sit in the darkness for a long time. Then I go inside, open my laptop, and write an email accepting the Colorado Springs position. My hands shake slightly as I hit send. But the decision feels right. The next morning, I tell my parents over breakfast. My mother's face lights up immediately. Colorado Springs, she says. That's a wonderful assignment. I'll leave in 3 months, I say. Plenty of time to make sure you're stable. I'm stable now, she says firmly. Don't you dare use me as an excuse to delay your career. My father grins. Told you she'd say that. They're genuinely happy for me. And in their happiness, I feel something release. A burden I didn't realize I was carrying. The weight of believing I had to choose between career and family. I don't. I can have both, just not in the way Aunt Linda's generation defined having both. Before I return to Washington, there's a small family dinner. Nothing elaborate, just my parents, Aunt Linda, Colonel Raymond, Ethan, and his wife. My mother is tired, but present, seated at the head of the table in the spot she's always occupied. Midway through the meal, she raises her water glass. I want to make a toast, she says, to Rachel, who's been our rock these past weeks. Who's built a career we're all proud of, and who's about to start a new chapter in Colorado. We're grateful for you, sweetheart, more than we probably say. Everyone raises their glasses. Aunt Linda's eyes are wet, and she nods at me across the table, an acknowledgement that carries years of unspoken apologies. To Rachel, they say in unison. I raise my own glass, looking around the table at these complicated, imperfect people who've shaped me in ways both painful and profound. This is family, messy, difficult, occasionally disappointing, but also enduring. We hurt each other and heal each other in cycles that never quite resolve. To family, I say, in all its complexity. We drink, and the conversation resumes, and life continues in its imperfect, beautiful way. 3 months from now, I'll leave for Colorado Springs. I'll take the next step in a career I've built with intention and integrity. I'll carry with me the lessons learned from years of navigating respect and disrespect, of drawing boundaries and maintaining them, of learning to value myself independently of anyone else's validation. But tonight, I'm here, present, grateful, and finally fully at peace with all of it. That day didn't rewrite the past, but it set my terms for the future. I don't hide the scar, and I don't negotiate my worth. So tell me, have you ever had family dismiss your work or your wounds? And how did you respond? What boundary did you set that finally changed the tone at home? Who surprised you by standing up for you when it mattered? If you were at that barbecue, what would you have said to my aunt or to me? Do you have a scar story, visible or not, that you're ready to own today?